Hello and welcome to the MAPE Resolution Forum. My name is Jerry Schmidt and I serve on the Delegate Assembly Taskforce, and I will be facilitating this forum this evening. In just a few minutes, we will jump into the resolutions. Authors of the resolutions will present their resolutions, and then we will provide time to take questions. We will use the Q&A function to submit your questions. What is a resolution? A resolution is a formal request to change the Constitution, election rule, policy, or bylaw. A perk of being in a union is we govern ourselves, so we get to have a voice in our own processes. Resolutions are at the heart of Delegate Assembly. The resolution process is designed to make our union stronger and more effective. So thank you to our members who submitted resolutions. Before we jump into the forum, we have a few housekeeping items for you. One will be recording will be on the Delegate Assembly webpage at mape.org. Two, we will pause for questions after each resolution is explained. Three, you can ask questions using the Q&A function in Zoom. Four, we will show each of the resolutions while it is being discussed. 5, you may find copies on the DA webpage on mape.org. As we prepare for DA, here are a few reminders of our delegates and alternates. We have one final resolution forum after tonight, so please make sure all delegates and alternates in your region are able to attend at least one. The final one is Thursday, October 19th at noon. There is a parliamentarian overview to review Robert's Rules of Order on Monday, October 16th at 1 p.m. This will be recorded, but please try to make it to the live event if possible. Either way, please review Robert's Rules documents in the portal before DA. Lastly, the Finance Work Group is holding an additional budget forums to walk through the budget that delegates will be voting on during Delegate Assembly. The final one is on Tuesday, October 24th at noon. Delegates and alternates should at least attend at least one of these forums. So let's jump into the resolution forum. The Constitution and Rules Committee has set the formal order we will take up in resolution.da. We have 3 resolutions that will be presented as follows. First one will be replacing Regional Chief Steward with Regional Lead Steward. Number 2 will be the State Officer and Regional Director term limits. And 3 will update election rules to change the timeline for negotiation representatives and DA delegates and DA alternates. I will introduce the title of the resolution, and whoever is here to present the resolution can unmute themselves. After the resolution is explained, we will pause for questions. So first up is replacing the Regional Chief Steward with Regional Lead Steward, and Kay Pedretti is here for that. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us about your resolution, Kay.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, this resolution is something that's been thought about for a bit, and it's something that as we go through it, you'll notice that some business agents and some locals already use this language. So just to kind of throw out the whereases right away, whereas our union strives to be inclusive, and whereas the use of chief can be offensive to Indigenous populations, whereas Minnesota State is working to remove chief from their titles, i.e. the Chief Diversity Officer is attempting to be eliminated, whereas many business agents and locals are already using lead steward. And we want to keep our language neutral, and we should eliminate language rooted in marginalization. And there are alternatives for the word chief. So sorry, go ahead to the next slide. So there's a couple different places where the word chief would be eliminated and the word lead would be replaced it would be put in its place. So there's election rules that have to be changed, and those can only be changed at delegate assembly. So that's why this is coming forward to delegate assembly. So this is just a spot here. When you notice this third from the last line, chief would be changed to lead. Then in the bylaws, Article 6 shows that, again, the Employee Rights Committee shall consist of the lead steward of each region and the vice president. And I think there's one more. Okay. In the MAPE Constitution, Section 8 talks about stewards. And in this case, it's the very last phrase. Chief would be changed to lead steward. Or it just defines it. So are there any questions about resolution 1?
Okay, can you cover your process for committee approval, please?
Yes. Let me see. This came, I brought this forward to the ERC month and a half ago, maybe. I don't remember the exact date. They chose not to endorse it. There is a possibility there will be a different committee that will endorse it prior to DA. So maybe by next resolution forum, I will have that. I know last time somebody asked me that question and I said no, but meantime, somebody who was listening asked me about it and we haven't quite gotten that result yet. Are there any other questions?
It's not a question. I'll just call myself as the chair of the ERC. Just to be clear with this group, the group that Director Pedretti is talking about is a diversity group. We felt, so the ERC basically felt like an endorsement should come from a group that has more historical and substantive, I'm having a hard time talking today, knowledge about this. So while the ERC doesn't necessarily dispute it, they didn't feel like it was their place to support it either. So that is why it's going to probably a group that makes more sense to talk about what this actually means. And I'll just leave that at that.
Okay, we do have one question in the Q&A box.
Okay.
So let me just read through it. It's more of a three-part comment, and then I'll let you react and respond. One person writes, the word chief can be offensive to indigenous populations. Many words can be offensive depending on usage, audience, context, for example, boy or queen. The word chief is not rooted in marginalization, though. It is rooted in Latin or Old French. Fixing the word chief designates a lead person, that, for example, chief of police, chief judge, etc. Do you have any thoughts about Ken's comments?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll go to the last one first. I mean, Ken does use the word lead to basically define what chief is. So I think it is a good alternative. Yeah, and so just to kind of comment maybe on the other two comments there that Ken has, you know, the word chief does offend some indigenous populations, and some populations of indigenous people it doesn't offend. So it's kind of a tricky situation. I will tell you, you know, I think part of this in my mind came from the fact not long after the George Floyd incident, there was a lot of talk at Minnesota State about getting rid of chief diversity officer. And I remember thinking to myself, well, at Winona State, where I work, we've never had a chief diversity officer in the 23 years I've been there. We've always chosen to call it something else. Any large group of people that's assembled at Winona State that the president comes to and addresses, he always begins with, "We are in the land of the Dakota people." And he goes on to talk about how we want to respect them. And I guess, you know, in my 23 years at Winona State and state service, I think that has been just how we think about it. And so to me, it seems strange that we haven't thought about it at NAPE yet. And I guess, you know, I mean, the word chief, I think it's been pointed out as well, is rooted in chef. So that is, yeah, that is true. Any other questions?
Todd, I put my hand up.
Go ahead, Angie.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to be respectful. So I was really trying not to say too much, but I feel like I should represent ERC a teeny bit here. And just so this group knows, and the message to ERC was for the currently called chiefs to bring this back to their regions and talk about why this was not supported by ERC. But one thing I just wanted to mention, and Kay said it very eloquently, some Indigenous people are offended, but some actually take pride. And what I wanted to point out to this group is that our ERC members, some of them take pride in the term chief, and felt like it kind of elevated them to the level that they should be at, right? So chief steward is like a very tough job, and typically it's hard. I just did elections for the even numbered regions, and it was not super easy. People don't want to do it. So, and there's a reason, because it's a lot of work. It's a very challenging, time consuming, and honestly psychologically draining role. And so the term chief to many of our ERC members meant something. And I think they understand that it could be you know, or is offensive to some groups, but to others and to them, it's a more of a position of honor and respect. Another part of what we talked about was like our president is the commander-in-chief still to this day. So are we jumping ahead of something that really has not been explored? And I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier. And I'm sorry, I just literally had a filling. So from talking funny, that's why. But I think the ERC wanted this resolution to go and get more substantive information. That's why, because there are different ways that people interpret it. But I think for this group, I really just want to stress the importance that, or the fact that our current ERC team felt some pride with that and weren't quite ready to give it up. So it's kind of twofold. They saw it as more of a honor, as like a positive thing, but also like taking it away. Were we doing it for the right reason? And I think that's good. Sorry.
Okay, and I'm just going to read the last kind of comment that came in the Q&A. They're saying chief comes from the French word for chief and means chief. Are you open to putting the proposal forth without the language regarding marginalization? I believe stewards should be called what they want to be called, but insisting that is marginalization language adds more complexity than there needs to be in the rationale. You know, there's another question that came in asking, does the resolution have the sponsorship or other form of support of any actual self-identifying Indigenous union members? I believe it does not.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I'd muted myself because I was taking something out of the oven.
Okay.
Yeah, I do believe it does not. It may soon. So maybe next resolution forum, we can talk about that a bit more.
Jerry, I also see that Liz has her hand raised. Do we have time for a question from Liz?
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This is a question for Angie, I believe. When you say they, do you mean current lead stewards consider it an honor, or Indigenous people?
So actually, great question. Thank you. And both. So I am more going to speak towards the current ERC members, and I'm just going to say that right now until we figure something out, but currently it is chief steward. They felt like it, so we have like lead workers in different positions throughout the state. Our current members have, so they just kind of felt like the word chief elevated them to a different level. So that's the main point. But there is a secondary point that we did have two members specifically that are Indigenous and did not feel like it was disparaging or anything, and they thought it was a term of honor. So, but I think really the point that I'm trying to speak for the ERC, and all I can say is that that was brought up during our meeting, that several people felt like it was a term of honor and they wanted to keep that term. So let's just go with that. And
Thank you.
yeah, and sorry, one more thing. I would just say that that's kind of why we recommended it go to like a diversity, or I can't remember off the top of my head what group, maybe Kay remembers. We just wanted some more research about the actual impact of it. I myself have never personally heard that as a concern other than from like staff letting me know. So I think that what the ERC basically is saying two things. One, they feel like it's a title of honor and respect that they should hold, and I agree with that in some respects. And two, if we are going to like support this, we should have a little bit more background history and information from appropriate groups. Great question.
We have one question. Could you remind us what ERC stands for?
Oh, sure. Sorry. So that's the Employee Rights Committee, and that is all 21 chief stewards from each region. Some have deputies and co-chiefs, but just really briefly, what the big part of what we do when we meet is we review arbitration appeals, but we also do a lot of training, information sharing, planning, getting together. We meet 6 times a year, but really the biggest point of the Employee Rights Committee is to hear when arbitrations are initially denied, our members have a right to come to all the chief stewards to present their case to have it hopefully overturned. So it's kind of that democratic process that we have in MAPE that our members ultimately will make the decision if a case is taken to arbitration or not.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Hearing no more questions, we will move on. Thank you, Kay, for presenting your resolution. Next, we have the statewide officer and regional director term limits. This was passed by the governance committee. The lead authors are Angie Halsa and Kay Pedretti. Go ahead and unmute yourself and walk us through your resolution.
Here I am again. Kay, do you want me to take this one since you just had to do the last one? Gonna take
Yes, that would be great.
Thanks, Kay. All right, so this resolution, whereas MAPE power lies within its members, statewide officers and elected leaders have become the face of the union in the last few years. MAPE is a member-run and led union. So I'm gonna just pause and take a minute on this one. In the past, our statewide officers were not necessarily the face of the union. It lied within an executive director more so, but we've moved away from that in what I think that the whole executive committee and the governance work group believes has been a positive move forward, having our members be the face of the union. And that just goes with the fact that MAPE is a member run and led union. One of the things that we have different than other unions, we don't report or give money to any international or national union. We are literally our own union, and that's something that we really take pride in. So this makes sense. It is imperative that elected leaders have knowledge and experience in governing our union. It typically takes at least 2 years for leaders to become comfortable in and truly understand their elected positions. And you'll hear more about this, I'm sure, from other folks, but I've been the vice president now for about 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years. And I am just starting to feel like I know what I'm doing. And in speaking with other board members, they had a similar experience. So just in 2 years, how much learning happens to move forward. And then that the things that we've learned, like in terms of relationships and how our union runs and our staff, our policies, our constitution and bylaws, that takes 2 years. So that's kind of important for this because to really become successful, you need to have at least a little bit of time to really learn your role and become comfortable in it. Limiting terms of elected leaders limits the expertise in the executive committee, the board of directors, and local officers. Again, I'm going to use Chet for an example right now. Former President Jorgensen and now Treasurer Jorgensen. I can't express the amount of knowledge and wisdom he has brought in our meetings. So while he might not be president, it just kind of goes with the fact that we want our leaders to have history and knowledge because it matters when tough decisions need to be made. Continuity in leadership is essential in governance of our union. I think I kind of just talked about that. I think it makes sense for our leaders to, when they're the face of the union, not only be the face for the public, but also for our 16,000 members. So here's where we would have to update in the bylaws, Article 7, Section 2B. We would strike the 2 to 4 years, and then we would strike statewide and regional officers shall be eligible to serve for no more than 3 consecutive terms in the same office. And then at the bottom, term limits apply even if terms of office are extended due to change in election timing. Article 6, Section 12. So this, we just had to, because organizing council and political council are considered statewide elected officers. We also changed that and just struck out 2-year period for those. Yep. So then we had to add in the current meet and confer chairs, or sorry, we had to strike the term as first vice president and second vice president will count as a term for vice president. We don't even have that anymore. And same with 3 terms prior to 20, we just struck that, so.
Okay, we will now open it up to questions. Please use the Q&A function to submit your question. Okay, we had one comment that says good change. Here's a question. 4 years is a large time commitment. Do you think this will reduce people's willingness to serve in these positions?
Great question. We did talk about that. No, I don't think that that's the case, actually. I think once a person gets it, like I said before, once a person gets into the role, it takes a couple years just to get in the groove, right? And the second piece of that would be, if for some reason someone it's volunteer, right? If I, even in my role right now, I could be like, I don't like this anymore, I'm done. So not that we encourage people to do that, but I don't think that would stop me or most people from running. It's not like there's some kind of consequence if you can't do the 4 years, if something happens. That has happened in the past. And we do have mechanisms in place then to fill that position if need be.
Okay, here's another question. So you want someone to be able to serve more than 12 years in one position? The president of the US can't do that. Why should the mate president? Actually, it should be why should the mate statewide officers?
Another really good question and valid, and I've heard it. So I would just encourage people to not think of us as the government of the United States. We're doing a different duty, and we're serving a different role. And in that role, when we're the face of a union, is different than being let's say, president of the United States. So I wouldn't probably compare us to the role of POTUS, right? I think we need to do what's best for our union. And with that comes consistency, it comes democracy. And I know there'll be, there's arguments about this, but I'm just going to say it. When we have elected leaders who want to be in the role, who are doing a good job, let's let them continue doing it. And if they're not, we have mechanisms in place to remove them or run against them. So I guess that would be my best answer, is that we're not the same. We don't run the same. We don't work the same as the United States of America. This is a different animal altogether.
And I'm going to go to Ann Atkinson. She has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add in, I chair the governance committee and we've been in discussion about these questions that have been asked. And one of the things with the leaders being the face of the union now, there's a lot more that comes with that as well. And if somebody no longer wants to be the face of the union, they can always resign. They can always not accept their next apparently, Angie, you're not the only one that's having trouble talking, nomination. And also with the additional duties, knowing the history of what comes into decision making, actually feeling comfortable with everything. We also, even as regions, have the issue with a lot of telecommuting now and people not being in offices. A lot of us in greater Minnesota have a very large distance to travel. I've been a regional director for 3 years, and I still have not gotten to all of my locations that I have here in the Northern Arrowhead. And I generally go out about once a month to locations specifically. And I still haven't made them to them all. I still don't know over half of my membership yet in the 3 years because I haven't been able to meet them. And the same kind of thing is happening now with telecommuting and the membership drives and things that we're doing. It's taking a lot longer to know our membership and to get acquainted with the members' issues, the members' support, and what all is going on in our regions in order to best represent them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Here's another question. Are there ways that an elected official can be recalled in the middle of a term if there are concerns about their leadership?
So yes. However, off the top of my head, I'm not prepared to answer that question. I don't know if maybe Todd, you might know that, but there are ways. So if I am a bad vice president, for instance, there are ways to unseat me, basically. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact process memorized, mostly because I don't think we've really had to do it recently, thankfully.
Yeah, but yes, there are ways to remove somebody from a position. Okay, one more question here. Do you think that doing away with term limits might make our leadership mimic what is currently happening with the current Senate leadership with no term limits? This seems to do away with the system of checks and balances. Also, good leadership is born all the time. Wouldn't this stifle new leaders from opportunities?
And you guys have some good questions today. I really want to take us away from comparing our union to the Senate for a lot of reasons. While we have, we're political in nature based on the fact that we work for state government, we're a whole different type of organization, right? And leaders aren't paid to do this job. There really is not, I don't want to say it wrong, but it's not like some kind of status like being a US senator, right? So I really don't want to compare us to that. And I want to talk about how we as a union are moving forward. And in terms of not encouraging future leaders, that's inherent actually in what we do and what I do, what all of us leaders do, we should always be encouraging someone is going to have to come after me at some point, whether it's in 4 years or 6 years. And don't think that those of us in these positions aren't constantly thinking about who's next, and we should be. And that's actually a big part of our strategic plan that we just did, last year, 2 years ago. But we've been very intentional about recruiting future leaders and then onboarding. So for example, with this new election coming up, for whoever's new to the board, they will be assigned a mentor. We have processes in place. So no, I don't feel it should not be. If we're electing good leaders, it should not be an issue. We should always be recruiting and finding somebody. One just more tiny example. So when I became vice president of the statewide, I had to leave my local president role. Well, while I was the local president, I was constantly recruiting to fill my place. And that's, I think, what all of us in leadership need to be doing all of the time, is constantly finding people. And I also encourage a healthy election. If someone wants to run against me this year, I'm up. I'm good. That's a good thing. It gives us an opportunity, and there's no reason that they can't. So I think the process is in place. One final thing I really want to remind us all of is we are an organization of professional employees. We're smart. We're educated. If someone's not doing a good job, I truly believe in my heart that someone will rise up and run against the other person. But also right now we're in a really good place in our union. We have an effective board, an effective executive committee, one that's run better than I've ever seen in 25 years of state service. So just to change it for the sake of change, or to try to change it because we're trying to compare ourselves to government, is, I don't know that makes sense.
I have Liz has her hand raised. Liz, go ahead.
Thank you again. I got confused with the discussion. Is this resolution to get rid of term limits or increase the limit?
So it's both. There will be no term limit, and then also terms will be extended to 4 years. And one of the things I have not mentioned, and I don't know, I'll try, but maybe Todd, if I'm not putting you too much on the spot, if I missed something, please let me know. This also makes it easier for our staff, the amount of work that goes into our elections. We all don't really realize because we're not doing it, but there's a lot of background things that happen. So extending to 4 years does a couple things. It makes things run smoother in terms of our day-to-day operations. But also, again, the 4-year term gives the person like an actual, like, real view and real term to figure things out, if that makes sense. And Todd, please feel free if I missed anything.
And then this next question is kind of related. It says, why is it necessary to increase terms as well as do away with term limits? Can't you just increase the length of the terms? I think that's what we're doing here, right?
Right. So I think that kind of is the first part of it. Term limits in general are a logistical nightmare for our staff to figure out, okay, who has been in this office for this many years and can't run again. It's really just messy. So I think that's why we want to get rid of term limits in general. I guess let people, if they want to run, let them run. You can always run against them. But it also is twofold, because it does have an impact on our day-to-day operations, and the the amount of work and tracking that staff has to do. So that's kind of why no more term limits because of tracking, but also instead of 4 years or 2 years, we'll do 4. It'll be less turnover and less work and less elections, I guess. So I think
Okay,
in
and I
some
have
sense, it makes
one
sense
final-
for our union, sorry.
And I have one final question here and we'll move on. I have concerns that you are asking us not to compare MAPE to other democratic institutions. Aren't we a democratic institution?
We absolutely are a democratic institution. And we're not trying to take away our right or our members' right to vote or run for office. That is not the point. What we're trying to do is keep our union running in a positive direction, which we really truly believe happens when we have members and leaders that are knowledgeable, have a history and a dedication to our union. Again, so I'm gonna be very transparent here. I get the fact that people might be a little concerned. I'll use myself for an example. Clearly, people probably know by now that I'm the vice president, so my name recognition will give or could give an advantage, right? But if I'm doing a good job, it should give an advantage. And if somebody wants to run against me, please, please do. Let's, we have that option. We're not trying to take away people's right to run or vote for somebody else or anything like that. It's more about consistency in our governance and what's best for us as a union. So we're not trying to take away the democratic process. Term limits aren't necessarily a democratic process. Congress doesn't have them, right? The president does. So I would just argue that does not take away any part of that. We're not saying that we can't. So in 4 years, Megan, sorry, I'm just going to throw you out there, President Dayton, will be up for election again. There is no stopping anyone from running against her. And if she's doing a good job, she should win again, right? But if she's not, then she shouldn't. And we just have to trust the process. So I think that's what we're asking our 16,000 professional members to do.
Okay, and then I just had somebody put a quick comment in. Tracking should be minimal. In the spreadsheet, there are data experts at MAPE. So that was just a comment somebody threw out there. And thank you, Angie, for presenting that resolution. And we need to move on to our third resolution here, which is the updated election rules to change the timeline for negotiation representatives and DA delegates and DA alternates. This resolution was passed by the negotiations committee, and the lead authors are John Ferrara and Kristen Kirchhoff Franklin. I'm not sure if either one of them are here to present, so I will turn this over to Todd, or if one of them are here.
They asked me to present it for them, if that's all right.
Oh, okay, Maureen, go ahead.
So basically, I'll just go through it and then I'll talk about our reason for wanting to do it. Here's the whereas when MAPE moved statewide elections from spring to fall, the new timeline created unintended consequences for the negotiations team and for delegate assembly delegates and alternates. So we had to conduct a special election to elect delegates and alternates for delegate assembly already. And whereas the delegates and alternates for DA 2024 would be elected nearly a year in advance, and the election for the next negotiation cycle was scheduled while the previous cycle was still wrapping up. And the negotiations committee asked for more time between the negotiation cycle and the election cycle for negotiations members to rest and recharge. And the election rules have legacy language related to the movement of the statewide elections, which needs to be cleaned up for clarity. So basically what we are resolving is to remove the DA delegates and the alternates and remove them from the even and odd year election cycles to a special election. and to do the same thing with the negotiation cycle. And the rationale behind that is that negotiations reps are still concluding the previous negotiation cycle while the election is in process, and while they would have to run and do all of that and represent the contract. And the negotiations team wanted more space between those events. This would also give members a chance to evaluate the performance of their rep before a new election started. This resolution gives the ability to move the elections closer to the start of negotiations. Delegates and alternates for DA need to be elected in the same year as DA. Moving the elections to the fall meant we needed to have a special election this year. And this resolution resolves conflicts in the bylaws and election rules to have the statewide elections committee call the election for DA delegates and alternates so that it is beginning closer to the actual event. So that's the rationale behind that. And if you have any questions, let me know. And there's the language. It's just striking it and then creating the special election language.
Okay, we will now open it up to questions. Please use the Q&A function to submit your questions.
Does that mean that we don't have questions?
Yeah, I just don't know if people are typing away. Yeah, because nothing's coming in the Q&A. So I am gonna take it that we have no questions on this one, as no questions have come in the Q&A and nobody has raised their hands. So we'll wrap it up here. So
Okay.
we'll come right back around. Does anybody have any final questions they would like to ask before we put this to an end? Okay, we have one. Since we have some time, can we get back to the cons for resolution number 2?
Go for it.
Hey, Dan.
Sorry, yeah, let me just unmute myself. It'll be easier. Sorry, I just wanted to go back to a question that I had put earlier at the end. And my only thing was that I'm not necessarily against resolution number 2. I just feel like the conversation was heavily in the pros from, the people presenting it. And I was wondering, were there any cons that were first identified when this first was being discussed? I imagine the term limits were put there originally for a reason, and being a new union member, I'm just more curious about that.
No, thank you. That's a really good question. And yes, I probably should have been a little more prepared for your question, because we did talk about the cons of it and why, the history behind why those were put in place. And the biggest part of that, just and actually I didn't even know this was even, it was kind of in my starting time, so I didn't really have a good grasp, but I do now. That goes back to when we used to be when we weren't member led, when our president and executive committee directors, members were not the face of the union. So it was a history where the executive director was our face, and it just didn't jive with the member led portion. So we've moved in a different direction, and that's why we've brought this back up, is because we really are trying to have our members be the face of our union. I think that's the most important piece. So that's kind of part of the history. I'm not the best person to talk about it. I know it just from hearing from others, but that's kind of the driving force there. The second piece of that, the cons, absolutely, we talked about cons, and I think some of the questions pointed towards potential cons, right? What if we have an executive committee that like goes rogue? What do we do, right? But again, we do have processes in place to handle that. The second one that I think I also mentioned was, again, like, people probably know who their regional director is, who is their statewide president or vice president. So when it does come to elections, those people maybe have an advantage, and it would be hard to unseat them. So that was a con that we considered. But in talking it through, we decided it really was not a con, because like I mentioned before, it's not that we're saying you're not up for, it's not like I said, hey, you elected me vice president, I'll be vice president until I retire. That's not it. It's, I can keep running for vice president until I retire. It's different. So we still have that in place. And I really think we have to put our trust in our members, that they know and they're watching and they're knowing what's going on. If I am not a good vice president, don't reelect me. Someone run against me. So it's the process piece. So while we're eliminating term limits and we're extending the terms, it doesn't mean that we're giving up that democratic process. But that was one of the cons that we thought about. But really, most of this resolution is pros for our union. And of course, I'm going to speak mostly in favor because I'm a co-author of it. So I truly do believe in this resolution. I think it's the right way for our union to go, and I just hope that we can kind of talk it through. And I'm available. People probably know ahalseth@mape.org if anyone wants to email, and we can talk it through further. I see we're at wrap up, so I'll stop talking. But if anyone has more questions or would like to talk with me about it, I'm happy to do that anytime.
Yep, that's what I want to add. If you have any additional questions about a specific resolution, contact information for the authors is on each of the resolutions posted on the webpage. I want to thank you all for taking the time to hear your fellow members' ideas for making our union stronger. And thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening.